Welcome to LawNext PR, the podcast where we put a spotlight on the latest news coming out of the legal tech industry. This is Bob Ambrogi, and in each episode of LawNext PR, I interview a legal tech company about its latest news and developments. Today, we're talking with the company CaseMark about its launch of Thurgood, an AI-powered coding agent for law firms and legal technology companies. And here to tell us all about it is Scott Kveton, the CEO and co-founder of CaseMark. Scott, good to talk to you.
Hey, great to see you, Bob. Always good to catch up, and excited to share what we're launching here.
Yeah, I'm really interested to hear more about this because everybody's been talking about vibe coding lately. You know, we've seen some of the generic companies of Claude and Google and others have put out their vibe coding products of late. So tell me about Thurgood. What are you launching here?
Yeah, so the idea here was to build a set of tools for folks that makes it easier for them to do their own vibe coding, and we're seeing sort of this whole wave of legal, entrepreneurs, attorneys, those types of folks who are out there building some really interesting projects. And I think a lot of this got really kicked off by Jamie So a couple, a month or two ago. And he really he vibe coded a tabular analysis tool, and it just kind of blew everybody's mind. It's like, wait a minute, if I can do this, does this mean, other people can? And so we started watching that and seeing it. And there were folks who wanted to build their own tools, and they always had to caveat it with like, oh, this isn't production grade, this isn't ready. Well, over the last 2 years, we've been building CaseMark, and we focused on delivering sort of these easy buttons for attorneys who didn't understand AI. The concept was, give us some of your files and we'll produce some work product that you understand that was powered by AI, saving you time, money, those kinds of things. And so we went through and built a bunch of infrastructure and those sort of, security and privacy components and certifications around SOC 2, HIPAA, those kinds of things. And what we realized was that was a great start, but we had this sort of framework that we could use. We actually launched it in December called case.dev. And it's a set of sort of 13 different primitives that you could stitch together to build interesting apps. So things like, OCR and file storage and database and transcription, all those like components that you need inside of a legal app. And so what we then did is we built Thurgood around that, which is kind of a wrapper, which says you can come in, speak in natural language, type in natural language, and it'll produce these apps for you. Well, we've taken that a step further now, and we've actually added the Thurgood Cloud Agent, which essentially you can point it at an open source repository, and it'll port it to case.dev and put it in that sort of security and, privacy certification framework so that folks could potentially take this to market and do something interesting with it. And so not only are we going to do that, but we'll also have kind of our directory of all these different apps for folks to be able to take advantage of. So for me, we hear kind of naysayers out there saying, well, these vibe coding apps, no one will ever use this stuff. And whenever I hear that, this little light bulb goes off in my head, because I heard that when open source was happening back in the late 90s. Everybody said that the execs at Oracle and these other companies, no one will ever use MySQL or Postgres for anything serious. And then, of course, everybody remembers Steve Ballmer saying, the iPhone's cute. It's a neat little toy. It'll never do anything. And of course, it became the most popular consumer product in the history of history. And so when I hear something like that, it makes me realize there's something here. But in addition to powering this for sort of these folks who are vibe coding on an individual basis, we're also now saying this concept of vibe coding isn't just shooting from the hip. You're not developing, kind of a willy-nilly here. We can actually help larger, legal tech companies and law firms that want to develop this methodology, which is, hey, I want to build my own tools and I want to maintain them over time. So can we do that? And so that's what we're starting to see, this interest from folks who want to do that at the enterprise scale. So we're really excited about what Thurgood's going to enable here.
Yeah. And just to kind of step back a little bit there's probably some people listening to this right now who've heard a lot about vibe coding, but don't fully understand what it means. So if I'm a lawyer, if I have no coding experience, is this something that I can go in and work with?
Absolutely, and that's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up. The idea here is that the subject matter experts actually are the ones positioned to best tell the story about the software that they want.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge I think we've had over the last 30 years in legal tech is that that translation gets lost in its path to the product manager and the PRD and then to engineering, and then it weaves its way back over 6 months to people, and they ultimately don't get exactly what they want. But if I can actually say, hey, I want to build this a tool that can take files and convert them, transcribe them, translate them from a different language. I want to understand this contract, those kinds of things. Underneath that is all this heavy lifting around OCR and where do I store the file and how do I keep it secure? How do I search across a whole bunch of data that might be in this case file? And so what we've done is abstracted that into Thurgood such that folks can just talk with it. And then when they get a working version that's up in a private sandbox, they can look at it, they can click through and go, no, 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 that's not what I want. Change this. This button should be over here, or this doesn't search correctly. Why is that? And so behind the scenes, we literally have these agents that are running and not only continuously building these tools, but also monitoring it on a regular basis. So as you're editing and tweaking, adding new features, we're making sure that it's secure, that it still maintains all the privacy and security components that people need. And to me, that's actually much more rigorous than today, where you have like an individual developer who you're sort of crossing your fingers. Hey, they may be really gifted, but they're not up 24/7 continuously reading your code and making sure that it's up to date and all those things. And I think that's where there's some really interesting, opportunities here for folks. So to me, this idea of being able to speak in a natural language, explain your problem, especially from the mind of an attorney who has that actual problem, is such a unique opportunity that we're hoping to, help folks be able to leverage.
It sounds so cool. So again, just to make sure I'm understanding, there's a lot of parts to this that on one level, if I'm a lawyer, or if I'm a law firm, and I've got this idea for something I want to build, an app I want to build. I can go to Thurgood, or I can even start a case.dev and
Yep.
go in and use what's available to me there and build that tool. But with the Thurgood Cloud Agent, I can take that farther and I can say, I'm not only going to build out this app, I'm going to make this app available to other people who might want to use it. Is that
That's
do I have
right.
that
That's
right?
right. That's absolutely right. And these primitives that we've built case.dev on are pretty standard things, Postgres database, we've got
Uh-huh.
storage components that they can leverage. And the idea for us is if they come into Thurgood and they actually do want to take this, maybe it's an open source project, maybe they just did it for fun and they don't want to take it to market, that's fine too. But maybe they do. We can help them not only stand it up production grade, they can host it on their own domain. They can have their own branding for the whole thing. We'll help them with figuring out a monetization strategy for it too. And then, on top of the case.dev infrastructure, we essentially just charge for the compute usage that folks use. So they will have an opportunity to potentially create an interesting business on top of these things. We also think there's some potential opportunities now to have sort of this federated network of these different apps that kind of work together. The idea being I might put my case files, inside of the case.dev vault, and I can have access to it across a variety of these different vibe coded apps that have been vetted. So now all of a sudden I can try some different things really quickly and solve a problem that I
Mm.
need, sort of solving that, I'm at the office on Friday afternoon, I want to get out of there. Oh, there's this tool that solves my specific problem, or it's Sunday and I have a case of the Sunday scaries and I know I have trial or arbitration coming up. What if there was a tool that could help me get the answers I need really, really quickly? Like, to me, that's really exciting. And I think the barrier has been sort of this enterprise software model that's, I get almost what I want and I have to pay for a lot of it when I'm not using it, which I think drives people crazy. I think that's the other thing that, the platform itself is all pay-go. If you don't use it 1 month, you don't get a bill. And we're able to accomplish that because everything we're doing behind the scenes is serverless. In other words, we spin up infrastructure and compute when they need it. If they're not using it, we turn it down to zero,
Mhm.
but it can spin up very quickly. And so that actually has been a really interesting sort of tweak to this model. And I think AI itself is not only forcing the rethinking of technologies that relates to legal, it's kind of forcing legal to finally rethink some of its business models. And so our thinking is if we can be really nimble in helping solve problems for folks and also help them identify new opportunities to monetize and build their own practices, then I think that's really, really interesting. And so that's kind of what we're hoping to achieve with this as we're moving forward.
So it's kind of a double-sided sandbox in that I can go in and vibe code an app and play around with it in the sandbox and get it to a commercial grade level through Thurgood, but I can also bring in my repository of my information and I can go in and kind of play around with some of these other apps that others have already built and see how they feel against my data. Is that That's right.
That's right. That's right. And there's, candidly, there's a lot of different opportunities and paths forward on this. Like, it'd be fun to pretend like I have the crystal ball and I know
Yeah.
the direction for this thing. But I think as folks are dealing with the uncertainty around what AI is going to do, our goal as CaseMark is to be a partner, kind of a Sherpa in these things. In other words, we're going to help you navigate this as we move through it. There might be, communities, affinity communities that form around these different projects that want to build them and continue to move forward on it. We just want to help power that from a back end perspective. As new technologies, new models, new ways of doing things come up, we can sort of bring those to bear behind the scenes and not have to worry the subject matter experts with the details of all that stuff. They just want to solve a problem. So we're going to help them do that. And while it may look like they're dragging a set of files into some web page, behind the scenes, there's all this magic that's happening around vector storage and
Uh,
open search and all these things. And so we just make that sort of easy, and very approachable for them to use.
yeah. So do you have in mind kind of examples of apps that lawyers might use this to build, or have some already used it to build some apps?
Yeah, we've had a bunch of we've built a bunch of like prototype apps, and you can
Yeah.
see those on case.dev/gallery. And then, just on the Jamie who's been doing the vibe coding stuff, he just did a big hackathon, this legal quant hackathon with 40 different apps that are emerging now. Folks are shipping those. Every single one of those is a potential to land on case.dev and potentially, turn into a product. To me, that's ridiculously exciting. And so, I think there's this massive ecosystem that's about to emerge. And
Yeah.
I think we're well positioned to kind of help folks out. Some folks will just want to continue to vibe code and they'll want to do it on their own systems. Some attorneys really want to make this stuff work on their local machines. That's great. I'm a huge fan of that as well. But there'll be those entrepreneurial attorneys who are like, oh wait, I know this space and I know what other attorneys that are trying to solve this problem need. If we can help them get there and then potentially turn that into a marketable solution, that to me is just exciting as all get out. And I think one of the other pieces, one of the other efforts for us in 2026 is finalizing a bunch of our partnerships. We've already got a partnership with Clio and Smokeball, and then we're working with a bunch of other folks, whether it's NetDocs, iManage, and others, so that we could potentially pull in data, both pull and push back to that, so that folks that are vibe coding these apps could potentially get access to that. Now, obviously, there's a whole vetting process that has to go
Mm,
into this. You can't just willy nilly do these
right.
things. I can even feel the collective folks probably watching this going, "Oh my God, no! That's a security nightmare." But again, I think it's inevitable where this is going to go. So, how do you put the framework in place so that it's as secure as you can make it, knowing this is going to iterate very, very quickly? And there's a huge opportunity here. The answer can't be just no, we're never going to do this, because I think that folks will kind of get rolled over. It's
Yeah.
inevitable. So, yeah.
Yeah, as I said earlier, there are any number of sort of commercial vibe coding platforms out there. Claude has Claude Code. Google has Google Anti-Gravity. Uh, others that I'm not thinking of right now. Uh, What's the argument for why a lawyer or a law firm, legal technology company would want to use one design specifically for law as opposed to one of these more general products?
Well, I think what happens is that when they want to take it to market and sort of finish it up, there's a bunch of legal specific considerations they have to take into account, whether that's the SOC 2, the HIPAA certification, depending on the region that you're in. We have a lot of interest from Europe, the UK, and they have different, data primacy requirements. There's a whole host of different things there. And again, those are just complexities that these folks don't want to necessarily have to deal with. I think that the secondary component to this too is there's a sort of an ecosystem or community of folks who are forming around this that want to find
Mhm.
tools that are like-minded that might get lost in the noise of those giant solutions like Claude Code and Anti-Gravity and others. I'm not knocking those solutions. They're phenomenal. And candidly, we're using a lot of the same technology. We've just stitched it together with a very legal focused view on it. And we'll continue to do so. And I think the other piece about this too is I'm not a lawyer, but I'm an attorney. I call myself attorney adjacent. I'm married to an attorney. My wife's an insurance defense attorney. She runs a practice here in Oregon. She specifically had said to me when I sold my last company, if you're going to do something this time, do something to help me. Our head of product and engineering, his father's a senior counsel at a large, one of the big large tech companies. A bunch of the folks on our team are attorney adjacent or, related to or have been practicing law. So we kind of see that this is kind of where this is all cropped up from. They're tired of the technology getting in the way of them solving practice, solving giving them the answers they want. And, my wife actually said it to me, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago in December. She said, "Stop telling me how to practice law. I know how to practice law. Give me a tool that lets me do what I want to do." And that's sort of a nonlinear thing to ask for, and that's hard. But to me, that's the things that are being created by these vibe coding attorneys. They're solving the problem they want to do, and all we're doing is with our solution, hardening it for other attorneys and potential legal tech players that might want to take advantage of these things.
Yeah. So if I am a lawyer, say, listening to this interview right now, and I'm thinking, man, I've got this idea for something I want to do. How do they get started? What do they have to do? How does it work?
So a couple things. So they can head over to Thurgood.law and they can, get in there and start playing with it right away, sign up, literally vibe coding as you get going. We also have, if you want to just, dig in and learn more or chat with somebody from our team, we can do that too. We've been working with some, larger law firms that want to actually take this infrastructure and use it internally. In other words, they say, "Hey, we want to build some of our own tools, or we have tools. What we want to know is how you're leveraging these agents and doing sort of this quote unquote vibe coding internally so that we can do that ourselves with our existing applications." There's a whole bunch of white space that exists between these big apps that are out there for solutions that need to be developed. And I think that's kind of where we're going to slot in for the time being. But I think ultimately there's going to be a much bigger play here. So head to Thurgood.law and you can get started today, or there's a contact us. You can reach out. Our DMs are open and we're excited to get working with folks.
Yeah. And what about cost?
So right now we're doing basically cost plus on all the infrastructure that we provide. So if you use our infrastructure, it's a credit-based system, whether you're using database or storage or all those kinds of things. And when you sign into case.dev and using the Thurgood piece, it'll tell you how much it's going to cost to run it. We'll give you kind of an estimate. But some of our customers are using this, building something and realizing it's going to cost them $25 to $100 a month to run. And they're like, great. And if they have a busy month, like it's, close end of year and they're doing a bunch of stuff from a tax perspective because they're, bankruptcy or whatever, they might use more. But then guess what? During those slow months, they use almost nothing, which is I think really exciting. And then we also have enterprise plans for folks who want sort of a turnkey handhold. We'll walk you through white glove solution as well that, has some minimum component along with a front end payment piece to it. Typical enterprise, but like, hey, we have to do some heavy lifting up front. And so we're going to help with that as we go. So yeah.
Well, I think this sounds really exciting. I want to get in there and do some vibe coding myself one of these days when I get some time.
Love it.
Anything else you wanted to point out about this? I know our time is limited today, but before we wrap up, anything else you want to say?
No, I think we're just really excited about what's happening here. I think this is kind of the iPhone moment to me that's happening in legal tech. I think for the last 30 years, I see this with my wife all the time, which is, legal tech, or I should say the legal industry has kind of fought technology, whether it was the fax or email or others. And while AI is an interesting technology, it's just sort of the fulcrum that's going to force this change. It's the impetus. And what's really, I think, going to happen is this opportunity for new solutions to emerge and turn into really, really great offerings for legal entrepreneurs, legal firms, and others. And we're just excited to be sort of facilitators of this. I think the next, 5 to 7 years is going to be crazy in this space. And we haven't even seen the really exciting stuff. I think we'll start to see that, this year, next year, and beyond. So yeah, really appreciate you having me on, as always, Bob.
Yeah, I really, really excited about this launch. I think it's really cool. And thanks so much for taking the time to tell us all about it. Good luck with this.
Awesome.
That's it for this episode of LawNext PR. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, go ahead and subscribe wherever you get your podcast, or you can find us on YouTube at LawNext_PR, or just search for LawNext PR there. This is Bob Ambrogi. Thanks for joining us today.